You have claimed that you oppose medical transitioning for these children, namely and specifically to what normally happens is puberty blockers, which you have called it child abuse.
A damaging, irreversible procedure.
Damaging. Okay. Ben, are your children circumcised? Did you circumcise your children?
Yes, I have two sons and they're both circumcised.
Why would you do that? Isn't that kind of hypocritical? Why is violating the bodily autonomy of an infant acceptable to you? And I can say, I'm a owner and I can tell you, there's sensitivity right there, Ben, that is removed.
You can be both circumcised and uncircumcised. You're going to have to choose. As far as the efficacy of a once it's circumcised, if you wish to get into the biology, I'm perfectly happy to just point at my 4 children. I've been fruitful and I've multiplied.
Did you know that in nearly every Ben Shapiro campus Q&A, at least 3 to 4 students will challenge him on gender identity, and almost none can answer his follow-up questions? This video captures the top 5 most awkward exchanges when students realize they were in over their heads. The pattern is almost predictable. Confident approach, emotional challenge, calm response, simple question from Shapiro, then uncomfortable squirming. The third student in this compilation actually starts nodding along with Shapiro's points halfway through their own question, a reaction that perfectly sums up these exchanges. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great! Thank you so much. Now back to the video. Have you ever noticed how some of the most memorable moments happen when someone asks a really simple question? That's exactly what brings us to Ben Shapiro's campus appearances.
You are officially woke. That is what wokeness is about.
Here, I want to hear.
No, this
it's
guy,
okay. It's okay. I want to hear. Let's at least hear the argument.
It's like, people's grandparents or their great-grandparents were slaves.
Well, it's okay. No, it's okay.
Fuck you, I'm talking!
When students line up at the microphone, ready to debate gender theory with rehearsed talking points, Shapiro hits them with just 4 words. What is a woman? It's like watching someone confidently walk into a glass door. These students arrive armed with arguments about gender fluidity and the social construction of identity, but when faced with defining the very term they're debating, they freeze up completely. One student approached the mic with that unmistakable look of someone who'd practiced their argument in the mirror. You could practically see the confidence radiating as they started explaining
that this administration shouldn't have the credence or the authority to make sure that people are protected.
So the Occupational Safety and Health Administration was set up by the OSHA Act. The OSHA Act was never held to apply to anything vaccine related. That there ought to be work mandates for vaccines. Then you got to make that case to Congress, and then Congress ought to actually pass a law saying that sort of thing. They weren't going to do that until the Biden administration, which literally said it did not have the authority to do this under OSHA, then attempted to use OSHA to do it, and the court struck it down. That's what we're talking about here.
This should be within the branch itself, that have people that, again, allow that seamless
transition. So you're in favor of a 4th branch of government that was never contemplated by the founders?
It's not a 4th branch of government.
It is if they can't be fired by the executive.
How gender differs from biological sex. The audience waited for the inevitable collision with Shapiro's logical roadblock. According to medical consensus, the student began, citing various organizations. Shapiro just sat there with that deadpan expression he's famous for. No interruptions, no eye-rolling, just waiting. The thing about Shapiro is he doesn't need to get loud or animated. He just waits for the logic to unravel itself, which is exactly what happened next. When he finally asked for a definition of woman, you could see the student's brain short-circuit in real time. Their face contorted into this priceless expression, half confusion, half panic, before they called the question a red herring. A red herring, as if defining the core term in their own argument was somehow a distraction. The beautiful part is the silence that follows. Shapiro doesn't fill it. He doesn't need to. The student scrambles to recover, reaching for authority figures instead of answering the question.
If the idea is that history has consequences, of course that's true. That's not wokeness. That is not wokeness.
I ran Elizabeth Warren's campaign. I helped organize her volunteers around here.
Wokeness suggests is that fundamental institutions in American society
are so... No, it doesn't.
Yes, it 100% does. You can be both circumcised and uncircumcised. You're going to have to choose. As far as the efficacy of a once it's circumcised, if you wish to get into the biology, I'm perfectly happy to just point at my 4 children. I've been fruitful and I've multiplied.
The World Health Organization says, and the American Medical Association defines, became their lifeline. But notice how they never actually provide a definition themselves. Meanwhile, Shapiro sits there, composed as ever. No raised voice, no interruptions. Just the occasional, okay, but what is a woman? Thrown in when the student pauses for breath. It's psychological chess, and these students don't realize they're playing against a grandmaster of debate. The audience starts to pick up on it too. You can hear the first few chuckles when the student tries to pivot for the 3rd time. By the 4th attempt to dodge the question, people are openly laughing. Not because Shapiro said anything particularly funny, but because the situation itself has become comedy gold. One student claimed to be both a mathematician and a physicist. Impressive credentials they made sure to mention, but when Shapiro's simple question stumped them too, they switched tactics entirely. Well, your whole approach to debate is problematic.
I obviously agree, and I personally have been targeted more than probably anyone else in America by alt-right anti-Semites, okay? Like, truly, by the statistics. The vastest proportion is inside the Democratic Party right now, which is why the Democratic Party seems unable to divide off from, say, Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib. Yeah. It's why they've had such trouble in simply declaring the obvious, which is that Hamas should surrender. It's, as a conservative. Now, let me say that the vast disproportion of people who are anti-Semitic in America right now, unfortunately, I wish this were not true. I wish it were a non-bipartisan issue and there were no anti-Semitism.
They said, abandoning any pretense of addressing the definition. It's like watching someone flip the chessboard when they realize checkmate is coming. What makes these exchanges so compelling isn't that Shapiro has some incredible comeback or insult. He doesn't need one. The comedy writes itself when reality collides with unprepared talking points. These students arrive thinking they're walking into a screaming match, but instead find themselves in a Socratic dialogue they never prepared for. Watch closely and you'll notice Shapiro never attacks the students personally. He doesn't comment on their appearance, their mannerisms, or anything else about them as individuals. He simply addresses their ideas, or more accurately, waits for their ideas to address themselves. In one particularly telling moment, a student tried to exit the conversation with a, "Well, I think we'll just have to agree to disagree," after failing to answer the question 5 different ways. The audience's laughter said it all. You can't agree to disagree when you haven't even established what you're disagreeing about.
It's like, people's grandparents or their great-grandparents were slaves.
Well, it's okay. No, it's okay.
Fuck you, I'm talking!
Dumb, and I'm actually not dumb. I'm actually very intelligent. You don't have to be like smart in everything. Do you know why a gas light comes on in a car?
Okay. Sure, go ahead. Tell me.
It's because it's a lie.
I love that she's taking the word gaslighting and she thinks that refers to the light in your car when you're low on fuel. How a young woman gets married and her husband is attempting to drive her crazy, and so each night he turns down the light, which is powered by gas. It is a gas light.
What's most impressive about Shapiro's approach isn't just his logic, it's his restraint. He never stoops to personal attacks even when students get frustrated and lash out at him. "I have every right to say that I disagree," he calmly explains, focusing solely on dismantling ideas rather than individuals. His questioning technique is brutally effective. When students try emotional arguments about societal intolerance causing harm, Shapiro doesn't get baited. He maintains that reality matters more than feelings, stating plainly, "I don't think the high transgender suicide rate is attributable to societal intolerance. The real entertainment isn't in zingers or put-downs. It's watching the collision between prepared talking points and unexpected accountability." Students walk in thinking they'll triumph with memorized rhetoric, but discover that logical consistency requires more than just repeating what you've heard. That moment of realization is comedy gold.